And welcome to Ramp Up to Retirement with your host, Dan Reese. Dan, big topic on the table today. Big topic. Social Security. If I had $1 for every email I got, from every text I got about somebody telling me what to do with my Social Security and how they could help me with my Social Security, I would have the greatest retirement ever, to be quite honest with you. So it's good to be with you as always, and let's dive right into the topic.
Yeah, it is amazing how many people are experts in Social Security. Like, I'm always like, oh, that's really interesting because there's so many factors and so many variables based on your own situation that it's pretty hard for your neighbor to be like, this is what you should do, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just like, to be honest, a month or two ago, everybody became tariff experts. Like, I was shocked how many people knew everything about tariffs in like within a week.
Yeah.
I was like,
brilliant
wow.
example. Yes. Wow. You know that
Yeah.
much? Holy cow.
Yeah. You had people that were econ majors that knew way less than the average person on Facebook. And I'm thinking, whoa, that's interesting. But, you know, the point is that whether it's tariffs or Social Security, these are complex topics, right? And
Yes.
so it always pays to learn. It always pays to learn because the reality, Social Security, honestly, is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, resource for most retirees. And so understanding it and how you can use it to your advantage is huge. And we want you to have the best retirement possible. And a big piece of that is this asset, right? Really understanding how to use it and not falling. So we're going to talk about some of the myths that you hear all the time today, you know, around Social Security, which there's many of them, right?
Yes.
You know, we're going to talk a little bit about, you know, some of the tactics that may be able to use if you're married or divorced or you've lost a spouse, which is really important. And then one of the other things that people neglect quite frequently is longer term in retirement, how Social Security may interact with things called required minimum distributions that you have down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And so in what tax issues that might be able to create or may create that unexpectedly, right? And so we're going to go through these things today. And obviously we got, you know, roughly a half hour. So we're not going to, this is not a PhD level class, Bill. But
Thank God. Thank God.
Right.
Does it make some sense out of these things? It's not really, I think anybody's expecting here. And so let's start with this. When do you claim?
Yeah.
You know, I've seen so many different kinds of advice. I've got my own opinions on it, but yours is what matters here.
Yeah. And I mean, in claiming is so personal to your own situation. And so like my pet peeve, and like, I don't know if my parents taught me this or I learned this in college, but I remember somebody at some point telling me anytime there's an absolute in a sentence, be very aware. Like you should always do this, or you should never do this, because life is not that simple. If life was that simple, we wouldn't have this podcast, right? Everybody would kind of know what to do.
Yeah, exactly. We're all on the same page. We're all doing it. No problem.
Right. But, you know, the big thing is that Social Security is so dependent on all the resources that you have available, along with what your needs are, right? Like you're looking at, you know, what are my resources? What are my needs, right? So like, simple example, you could have a married couple, right, that both worked and both made high income and they both have good Social Security. They're going to probably do something completely different than the situation where one spouse stayed home with kids while the other one worked and they don't have much Social Security, right? And so that's just a really simple example. But you think about that when somebody says you should always take it at 62, right? One of the biggest myths that I would say around Social Security, you need to really think it through, because I know you want it. Like I always tell people, like, you know, there's this idea that I worked my whole life. I need to take that as soon as I can get it. But, you know, patience really can pay off substantially with Social Security. And so if you can get more out of it long term by waiting a little bit, and you have other resources to fill that gap, many, many times you're way better off waiting, right? Because like you can wait all the way up to age 70, and you hear people like, I would never do that. But then when you start looking at some of the numbers, you'd be shocked how many people actually do, and they actually win big time for their family, you know.
It's a big, big, big difference. You can take it when you're 62, but your
Mm-hmm.
payout when you're 62 and start taking it is going to be far, far less than if you wait till 70,
Mm-hmm.
because there is, and you got to help me with this, Dan. It's like, what is it, like 8% a year? Is
Yeah.
that
So
what we're working?
typically from 62 up until your full retirement age, which is 67 for most people today,
Yeah.
it's going to go up around 7%. And then from 67 to 70 up 8%. And the thing is like you start running numbers. Like if I gave a really simple example and I said, hey, you have two buckets of money. Let's say this bucket's growing at 5% or 6%. This bucket's growing at 7 or 8. And you need to take money out of one of them. Which one would you take money out of? Most people are going to say, I'm going to take the one making less money, right? Because why would I take money out of the one making more money, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But that often happens with Social Security. If you look at your IRA portfolio and your Social Security portfolio, if you will. But we don't make that choice because we have these stigmas around, well, I was told I have to take it, right? And so that's just a simple example around that. But those increases can be very valuable. Other thing I'll note on that, Social Security has what's called COLA, cost of living adjustments each year. Yep. And they average 2.5% to 3%. That's kind of the most common number, right? Well, it's a percent, key word there, right? So if your benefit is larger when you start, your annual raises are larger, right? In a dollar, perspective. So when you start looking at that and all of a sudden these raises are more substantial each year, that really comes into play. So it's a bit of longevity insurance really when you wait longer. So it's really something to think about before you start filing right away at 62.
The other thing I've heard a lot when people are talking about when to take it is they're like, hey, you know what? I put into it, I paid into it, and I might die next year. And I put money in, I want it out. I mean, what's your response? And I'm sure you've heard that before.
Absolutely. And that's a real thing. You could die. I mean, that's, we all are going to die at some point. And you do have to take, when we do Social Security planning, we do take in life expectancy. So let's say, for example, someone has diabetes or they have heart conditions or something where their doctor has told them, hey, your life expectancy is likely going to be cut a little bit short. That's also not a guarantee. I mean, they might come up with new, medical research or findings that all of a sudden you're living to 100, right? You don't know that. But we do take it into consideration, and it is prudent to do so. But here's the reality. Most people live much longer in retirement than what they expect. That is the absolute truth. If you look at all the numbers, like if you live to 65, on average, a man's going to live till 85, a woman till 90, roughly. And so that's just kind of like high level. So that's averages. You could live longer, you could live shorter. But here's the other thing that really is important is that you have to understand, if you're married especially, when one person dies, the remaining spouse only gets the higher of the two. So like one of the things that we always go through with clients is that if you've got husband and wife, let's say the wife's benefit is just hypothetically $3,000 a month and the husband's is $2,000 a month. Yeah. If one person dies, you're going to get the $3,000 a month only. So you go from $5,000 a month to $3,000 a month, right? And so that really is important when you're making those decisions, because you might say, I might not live that long, but my spouse might live a really long time. And so like that gives an example of, sometimes a higher income earner making sense even to push it till 70. So there's more, certainty that the remaining spouse is going to have good Social Security income no matter what happens.
Yeah. I want to go back to that in a minute, but I just want to finish this off because, there are a lot of people, and look, it's a legitimate concern. A lot of people are saying, hey, you know what? But I read the papers, I read the internet, and if this program may go bankrupt and there may be no money left in it, and I've been paying into it, so I want my money now.
J.G. Wentworth. I want my money now.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the reality is Social Security is not bankrupt. The reserve is going down where it's estimated that in 2035, I think is the last thing I read, they'll be able to pay about 80% of benefits if there are no changes, right? big if there are no changes. The likelihood is they will make an adjustment so that it continues to be fully funded, because it is a huge, very important program to pretty much every American. And, so the reality is it's not going bankrupt. You're always, the benefits are going to continue to be there. Right. Yeah. And the other thing that I caution everybody on, this is so easy, and this is human nature. We all suffer from the same thing. If there's something that we kind of want, as an example, the shiny new car, it's very easy to take your selected data that you cherry pick without even realizing it to justify that purchase. So as an example, I'll take a car. Well, my car's got 80,000 miles on it. Nothing's been wrong with it. It runs fine and everything. Be like, a lot of times stuff starts happening to cars at 80,000 miles. I should buy a new one. Well, maybe not, right? Because you find other people that they're driving their Honda Accord with 250,000 miles on it, and they're like, I've hardly done anything to this car, right?
I only laugh because I had a Honda Accord that was a 5-speed that I drove for 325,000 miles. So.
Exactly. Right. So, but my point is that we justify things. So like these myths, like taking it at 62, or I might die early, or they're going to run out of money. If you think about it, a lot of the myths are around wanting to get something as quickly as we can. When the reality is like, if you're patient and you have a well-designed retirement income plan, it's very likely that your plan will be more secure by waiting a bit on Social Security, right? And there's software that'll tell you, like, I'm not just saying this out of my own opinion, like we run these plans every day. And it's shocking how much better your probability of success is when you're able to push Social Security out a little bit. And so it's just real important that you make a good decision and don't just fall into the myths. Do some research, talk to qualified, certified financial planners that can sit down and look at your situation, right? Not just what everybody says.
And I want to underscore that certified financial planner aspect, because you are a CFP and you have a fiduciary duty. There are a lot of people out there on the great worldwide internet that are giving advice on Social Security that are less selfless. They are not fiduciaries. So anybody's listening to this, I just want to drive that point home. Find Dan. Find somebody like Dan who is a certified financial planner, because they are going to give you information that you can rely on and know is in your best interest.
Bill, I want to mention something on that, because I think they're called, what's the term now? Financial, I'm trying to think. I'm not going to be able to hit it, but the people that you're talking about that are not advisors, but they're online, they're financial influencers, but there's some other term that they use for those. Keep in mind how they get paid. They get paid based on the traffic they generate, the number of people that are listening and watching and all those other things, right? So a lot of times it's not that they're interested in giving the best advice, although some are, right? I don't want to throw them all in one category. There's some really great people out there. But you have to be careful, because the reality is like a true fiduciary is going to look at all the numbers and say, hey, this puts you in the best situation, regardless of how that affects that person or that advisor. A simple example is many advisors today get paid on assets under management, meaning the more money they have under management with a client, the more money they're going to make annually. You see the Fisher investment commercials that say, we do better when you do better. Well, the idea is that's true in many regards. The bigger your portfolio grows, the more money they're going to get paid, right? Which is similar to many advisors. So if you think about true advice that says, hey, you should wait on Social Security if that's best for you, that means that that money has to come from somewhere to support your income. So it's likely coming out of your portfolio, which means that the advisor would get paid less. So like, if you think through that and you're like, if you wonder if you're getting truly good advice, that's a pretty good indicator, that the advice that you're getting from a certified financial planner is actually resulting in less money that they get paid to work with you, right? And that goes for many things. Roth conversions are another example where you're prepaying some taxes and the portfolio value goes down some because the taxes have been paid, which means the revenue for that advisor goes down, but very well might be a very good thing for you to do. So
No, what you were just saying is absolutely positively true, Dan. And that leads us into you got us there just a couple of minutes ago, but I want to go into it a little bit further. The spousal and survivor benefits. Even I am not quite sure on how that works. I got it that if my wife and I are taking Social Security and I die and my Social Security payment is higher than hers, she can then collect mine, but she has to lose her payment. So that's simple enough to grasp, but it doesn't seem really that simple, Dan, because it's a major adjustment.
It's actually simpler than it used to be because a few years ago they made some changes based on what you could and couldn't do. But the big thing to understand is like when Social Security was created, one of the things, over time that they realized is, hey, we have people like, back in the day, there were a lot of housewives. Like my mom stayed home with us, right? And she didn't begin working till later in life. When my oldest brother went to college and she started working part-time, but she never made that big of an income. So that meant she didn't create that big of a Social Security benefit, right? Because that is a result of income earned over your lifetime. And so one of the things that they do is that they make sure that the spouse that didn't work or worked a limited role throughout that time, by the way, let me say, being a housewife is not a limited role. I just want to get that on the table.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
I really appreciate
that is an extremely challenging role.
Exactly.
But beyond that, when you start looking at it, so what they did is they basically gave call it the non-working spouse or limited working spouse, half of the working spouse's benefit for themselves. So in a simple example, let's say I'll use $3,000 a month for, let's say Joe had worked his whole life and accumulated $3,000 a month at full retirement age, which is important, full retirement age, which today is like 67 for most people. When the spouse hits 67, as long as Joe has started his benefit, Judy would be, entitled to one half or $1,500 a month, even though she didn't necessarily accumulate that benefit on her own, right?
Okay.
And so, but I will tell you, a question comes up all the time. Well, what if Joe waited till 70 and his benefit was $4,000? Does she now get $2,000? No, she only gets half of what his full retirement benefit was. So the extra benefit for him waiting till 70 does not affect Judy's benefit in that example, right? So that's one thing, that one half, right? So that's important to understand. The other thing is, looking at my notes here, when you get into, we have a lot of divorces in our country, right? So those rules, if you're married longer than 10 years, that rule still applies where the spouse, the lower income earner could get half of the higher income earner's benefit at full retirement age, even though they were divorced at that point. So what
happens, Dan, to throw a twist into this, a little curveball, what happens if one part of the divorced couple gets remarried?
Yeah, if you get remarried, the lower income earner gets remarried, and I have to double check. These get really complicated, but I believe in most cases they would not be able to file any longer under the prior spouse. So that's the most common. And then the last one is when you lose a spouse, which is a very unique situation. You actually have pretty good options. I mean, it's an awful thing to go through, obviously. But if you lose a spouse at 60, you actually can begin getting benefits, right, for under your deceased spouse's coverage. Okay. And then the thing that's unique about that is that you actually could then let your own benefit grow until 70 if you wanted to, or a later age, and take your own benefit down the road. So that's one of the rare instances where you could actually claim each benefit separately. Now, you can't have them both at once. You don't get that, right? Okay. Only one at a time. But it does allow some extra planning. So there's different cases where, maybe a spouse's husband passed away and he had a higher income. Even, she might take hers not at 60. She could not take her own at 60, only her spouse's. Yeah. But she might wait and take hers at 62 and wait till 70 on his or something like that. There's a lot of different options. Yeah. But these laws are changing all the time. I always want to caution anyone, we're talking in generalities here because, the Social Security laws are very complex and there's a lot of factors. But
Yes.
understand the big takeaway is understanding spousal benefits, deceased spousal benefits, divorce spousal benefits. There are different programs that exist. And so that's where it comes into really making sure you are looking in detail with a qualified professional is what might be your options and what are the best ways to claim those options.
Again, good advice. Good advice. Talk to somebody who knows. Because, you're right. These are really complicated. And speaking of complicated, one of the more complicated things in life that you just can't ever escape, taxes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so how do you coordinate the Social Security benefits with the required minimum distributions or pension plan or whatever it is that you have?
Yeah. And one of the things I will say is that it's very common. Somebody retires, they're going to take Social Security as soon as they retire because that's what they're told. We talked about that earlier.
Yep.
You're crazy not to. So they take that right away, which means they're not taking as much out of their retirement account, which means their retirement account is growing more. And so what happens is as these accounts grow, the future required distribution gets bigger. And so when you look at the overall big picture, Social Security becomes taxable. Up to 85% of your benefit becomes taxable based on your other income coming in. So a lot of people think, hey, I'm really smart. These first few years of retirement, I'm paying no taxes because the way I did it, and they're giving themselves a pat on the back, not realizing that in the future, because of those choices, they may have higher taxes than they ever imagined. And in certain circumstances, they may actually even have additional Medicare premium if their income is pushed up high enough at that point in time. And so we kind of call that a tax time bomb because you didn't really put it out across all of retirement, your whole tax plan throughout retirement. And like I always kind of mention to people, it's funny, certain characteristics of money. Like if you go, we were talking about cars earlier. If you go to the dealership and you find a car and it's $30,000 and you write them a check for $30,000, you're going to pay $30,000, right? If you take a loan, you're not having to write that check, but over time, you're going to pay a lot more than $30,000, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's very similar oftentimes with taxes and retirement. And so this is really important to coordinate Social Security claiming when your money's coming out of the IRA, also things like Roth conversions and all these other things around it, even capital gains on like money that's not in retirement accounts that has different tax characteristics. But really understanding how do we take all this stuff, create a retirement income plan that is going to not only give us a really good outcome with Social Security, but also a really good tax outcome so that we're not getting this big surprise in our 70s where you all of a sudden are having to pay the IRS money you never anticipated having to pay them because you didn't pay any tax early on in retirement, right?
Yeah.
So it's a huge, huge thing. And there's other stuff that goes into that too with things like qualified charitable distributions. There's all kinds of tax planning things around those IRA distributions. But just understand there is an outcome by default that occurs at your required beginning date, which typically is 73, 74 in that range, which it depends on when you're born. That is going to occur. The IRS is going to get money out of that account one way or another.
There will always be taxes. Absolutely. It's funny, Dan, you reminded me, I was talking to an accountant once, and he said to me, you would be shocked to know how many of my clients don't have any withholding on their Social Security. And he said, and it's a big mistake because it creates a massive it creates a liability for them every year, and they can't understand why it's created a liability. And it's like, they cause taxes.
Yeah.
And, they just think, they just think, oh, I don't have to pay them.
I think that's a great point because what happens is there's a lot of misunderstanding around Social Security and how it's taxed.
Yeah.
And so that's another great plug for certified financial planners because typically they have pretty good knowledge around taxes and how they work. And so we always talk about you can't separate like investment planning and retirement income planning and taxes. They're all tied together. It's all tied together. And so one of the things that you mentioned is people having a liability when they file their taxes, not withholding enough. That can also cause penalties on taxes, right? Depending on your situation.
Yep.
And so you really, a good financial plan in retirement addresses taxes. It addresses your withholding. I was just working on a case this morning where there's some changes in state tax laws in Michigan, right? And so they actually don't need to withhold as much state tax as they did prior. That's a change, right? And so that's a good thing because guess what? One little dirty secret when you get in retirement, you just don't want to know what's deposited into your account every month. Well, the gross distribution can be much different than the net distribution based on how much taxes you withhold. And so actually, if you're doing it the right way and you're not withholding, like, so we can reduce some withholding because you don't owe as much, that means less total money's coming out of that account, which means more can stay in there to grow. So there's a lot of little intricacies around this stuff that you need to be aware of. But yeah, I mean, the tax part of it is huge because it can be a game changer for retirement.
Yeah, so let's wrap this up. Let's tie this episode up with a little bow and give us your final thoughts on it.
Yeah, number one, be really careful around these myths out there. You're crazy not to take it at 62, or you might die early, or it's going to run out of money. There are some concerns around Social Security, but we want you to make a well thought out decision that's going to put your family in the best long-term position, right? That's number one. Let's try to take out as much emotion as we can so that we can focus in on the decisions that are going to help you succeed. That's the first thing, right? Mm-hmm. Secondly, understand there's some pretty complex rules around your spousal claiming strategies. Whether there's a divorce involved, a death involved, or you're just still married and wondering what's the best way you can take it. Understanding that ahead of time can really help you make a good decision, right? That's a huge, huge thing. And then, and especially around, like we talked a little bit about Social Security running out of money. It's not going bankrupt. Understand it. There's some issues there, but 80% funded in the future and things like that. The big picture too, coordinating things, making sure you're working with a good professional, knowing your options, all those things are really going to help you succeed with this. One of the biggest assets you have, like it or not, Social Security, it's complex. It can be frustrating, but it is an amazing program. I mean, it is an amazing program. Mm-hmm. Like you look at so many of our clients with proper planning, how much income they have coming in from that benefit every month. And it's fantastic. So, I mean, I know there's all this very, I love it, I hate it stuff in the media about Social Security, but be thankful we have it. I'm sure that, I don't have tons of faith in Washington, but I do think they'll get this fixed because I think it's so important with everybody. But make sure you just make good choices.
Really good advice. And for those of you who are listening to this podcast who are not already clients of Dan's and thinking, maybe I should have a conversation with Dan. He's easy to get a hold of. Dan, what are the ways to reach out to you?
Yeah, easiest way is go to our website, which is just averywealth.com. And I will tell you, there's some Social Security resources out there in the Insights tab. You can search under that and find some of that stuff. We are happy to do a Social Security analysis for you, just to kind of you just really need your Social Security benefit statements and a rough idea what you have in retirement accounts. And we can run that for you so you can understand the impact of different choices. And I highly recommend, if you're worrying about this stuff, I highly recommend, coming in and letting us do that with you because you'll be glad you did, I think. You can always reach out to us on the Contact Us tab on the website, and you can always call our office. We're always here, 517-783-1695, which is also in the show notes. But yeah, give us a call. Don't stress over this stuff. Knowledge is power. I think most people are pleasantly surprised when they create the right integrated retirement income plan, how well everything works and how much the stress level can go down. So that's my hope for everyone listening.
Yep, absolutely. Because retirement can be really stressful anyway, as we've covered in prior episodes. No reason to make it more stressful. For those of you who are listening to this podcast who are not subscribers, one of the other things you could do that's really simple is hit the follow button. because that way you'll be notified every time Dan issues a new or drops a new episode of Ramp Up to Retirement, and you can give that one a listen. I would also ask that if you like it, please share it with other people, because word of mouth is the best tool of promotion there is, as opposed to some anonymous recommendation on the internet that you don't know where it came from. So thank you for taking the time to listen today. I'm Bill Tucker on behalf of Dan and everybody at Avery Wealth. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and we will catch you next time. Thank you for listening to Ramp Up Your Retirement. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at www.averywealth.com or give us a call at 517-783-1695. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Avery Wealth. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment plan. The opinions voiced in Ramp Up to Retirement with Dan Reese are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial, or tax advisor prior to investing. Guests on the show may not be affiliated with CWM LLC. Views and comments by guests may not be representative of CWM LLC. Investment advisory services are offered through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Carson Partners, a division of CWM LLC, is a nationwide partnership of advisors.